About 4 years ago, Zack Smith introduced us to stockcropping, an autonomous pen for animals to rotationally graze between row crops. Since then, he's grown his company and simplified the idea to now offering a drive that's accessible even for backyard producers.
Stockcropping is awesome. It works. It's a phenomenal system, but we're going to shift our emphasis over to this more of a bottom-up approach as far as instead of the top-down feed the world, bottom up, how do you teach people to feed their families?
So what does it look like to pivot from selling to large row crop farmers to selling to customers just trying to feed themselves?
So there's 12 million backyard chicken operations in North America. There's 1.5 million homesteads that are growing their own protein. If you want to raise really good eggs or good meat, the animals need to be in fresh grass and soil all the time. That's what we really solve with the drive.
And this is no small market. It's likely to grow as things like AI become more prevalent and people look for connection and meaning in their lives.
We fled the farms 100 years ago, or the last 100 years to go to the cities to do the important work because we weren't needed. Now the important work could be eliminated for a good chunk of, the workforce. What are people going to return to?
Farmer and founder of Stockcropper, Zack Smith, on today's Future of Agriculture podcast. Hello, fellow Ag Nerd. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Future of Agriculture. My name is Tim Hamrich, and every week you and I get to hear from the founders, farmers, innovators, investors, the people shaping the future of the ag industry. Today's episode features a repeat guest, Zack Smith of Stockcropper. Zack really is an ideal guest for the show because he's both an independent thinker and also a doer. Someone who's putting his own skin in the game to make his vision for the future of agriculture a reality. Today, Zack and I are going to talk about his company's recent pivot to focus on what they call the drive. No, not like a computer drive, a self-contained motor that can be mounted on any movable poultry or livestock pen that meets a certain dimensions to make it autonomous and solar powered and still secure from predators or potential escapees as it moves the pen onto fresh grass. So think of it almost like a trolling motor for rotational grazing pens. I love the idea of stock cropping. 4 years ago when him and I talked about the first product, which was called the clustercluck. And I have to say, I'm even more bullish now with how he's adapted this technology to make it more of a consumer-friendly product. What you're about to hear, to me, seems like a real game changer and inflection point for Zack's young company. The story hits on a few interesting trends to me. First, of course, is regenerative agriculture, which talks a lot about livestock integration, but there really don't seem to be a whole lot of options out there to do this at scale. When you look at what's happening with Halter, the $2 billion valuation, Peter Thiel involvement that's been kicked around lately, certainly a hot space, animal integration into regenerative ag systems. And I think Stockcropper really fits right in there quite nicely. Another trend is food sovereignty. So these homesteaders and others that want to play a more active role in producing some of their own food on some level. So bringing tech to these types of trends, I think, is really interesting. And I think you'll be really compelled by Zack's story today. Quick background on him. Zack Smith is a farmer and agricultural entrepreneur who's been focused on coloring outside of the lines of conventional agriculture since 2020 with the creation of his company, Stockcropper Inc. Stockcropper, over the past 6 years, has created a regenerative farming system called stockcropping that intersects row crops and livestock made possible by a multi-species grazing barn solution called the clustercluck 5000. The system and invention was featured in the 2024 film documentary Food Inc. 2, Back for Seconds, as well as at Precision Planting's PTI farm in Pontiac, Illinois, where the stockcropper system in 24 and 25 shattered the all-time site production corn records at 426.7 bushels per acre and 434.9 bushels per acre, as well as the highest profitability compared to all other innovations at the PTI farm. But as you're about to hear, the company has pivoted from focusing on these row crop farmers to a new market. So they've developed the clustercluck Pico and most recently the clustercluck Drive, and have started raising funds just this past month or so to bring these products to market in the coming year. I'll drop into the conversation here where Zack is giving us an update since his last appearance on the podcast and some context about how the company has evolved into where it is today. When we spoke, I guess it's already been almost 4 years ago now, and you were on the show. You're talking about some of your experiences with ag retail, some interests in kind of local meat, and the integration of livestock on the farm, which is, easier said than done, and certainly a lot easier on a small scale than it is on a commercial scale, which is what you operate at. And so you created this invention, which was a way to manage poultry and livestock in between, rows of corn at the time. And I know you said you've expanded to other uses now, where it's solar powered, autonomous, and it moves kind of in a way where the animals can graze or in the case of chickens, I guess, like pick insects out of the ground as they go, so that it basically lowering the amount of labor it takes to do rotational grazing, especially integrating with crops. Am I tracking so far as kind of the origin story?
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. And the other thing that we did that nobody else had done yet is find a way to do multiple species of livestock within the same contraption or wagon train that would be progressing through, so you could get the power of vertical stacking of enterprises, not just one species, but a whole multitude. And then there's a whole bunch of beneficial effects to having more than just one type of manure and what the animals do to the soil, and just kind of a beautiful thing. So.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember what excited me about it at the time, and still excites me, is that I think we all agree that we're headed in a more regenerative direction. I think we probably disagree on like how quickly and how far we're going to go, but there are very few technologies, I think, that truly enable like a more regenerative approach, and that I see commercially out there in the industry, and this is one of them. So maybe could you give us a little bit of an update on what has happened with that original idea? I'm going to ask you to compress 4 years into 4 minutes probably here, but a little bit of an update of what's happened since.
Yeah. So the last time we talked in 2022, we were just getting done with creating what we call the clustercluck Nano, Nano 2, which was the third version of this multi-species autonomous barn. And at the same time, when we were doing that, this system depends on having an independent meat production system for farmers to be able to sell them into. And what we were hopeful after COVID happened with some of the supply shocks that happened, that the system was going to change. There was a lot of talks that would open up access for farmers to sell things like, poultry or chicken, which are completely vertically integrated by the big four now or whatever. And so when we realized that, we started to say, like, stock cropping is awesome. It works. Like, it's a phenomenal system, but we're going to shift our emphasis over to this more of a bottom up approach as far as, feeding people. So instead of the top down, feed the world, bottom up, how do you teach people to feed their families? And it is correlated well with just the craziness of things that have happened in the world. COVID taught us that their food is not guaranteed on the shelves. It was 6 years ago this week when the whole thing broke loose. And it was in April when the meat supply chain completely fell on its face. And then last year, bird flu swept through the poultry industry, and we had $12 eggs, and every chick store in the country was sold out of chicks by the end of January, because everybody had this need for, like, hey, I need a hedge against the fragile system. And so we've pivoted what we're developing specifically into what's the immediate opportunity, but we're sure not going away from the stock crop or origin story, because it's still incredibly powerful, and we're doing awesome things with that. So we've still had the last bigger scale barn working at Precision Planning's PTI farm in Pontiac, Illinois. They reached out in 23 and said, hey, we think you're on to something, because we've been doing this strip intercropping, but we don't want to do corn and soybeans. We want to do corn and livestock, and we think you have the answer. And so Jason Webster asked if I would give him one of our prototypes to use, and we sent it down there in 23. It ran for the first time. They basically implemented the stock cropping system. And then in 2024, the next year after the barn ran, where we planted corn where the animals had gone the previous year, with the unique intercropping system, with the edge effect benefit you get with that, we set the all-time corn record. We shattered the old record by 30 bushels. We grew 435 bushel corn the first year out of the gate. And in 2025 here, we finished it up. We got second place all-time now at 426.7 was our yield from the stock cropper this year. And we were by far the most profitable ROI to a farmer with the system of anything else that, they compare everything that's cool and novel and innovative in agriculture on their farm. They have 500 acres there. And our simple little farmer-led idea with, not a lot of capital investment, we smoked everything there, and I'm really proud about that. So, but the reality is that thing, in order for it to be a scalable business that's easy to invest in, we have to have a lot of other things change. So in the meanwhile, we're looking where the opportunity is. We can take all the things we learned from making autonomous stuff to work in a cornfield and make it work, in somebody's backyard or acreage to help them grow their own protein.
Okay, yeah. And so you've got that, which, as you called, is kind of more of a top-down approach. Let's start with the biggest of the big, commercial farmers and show that it's possible. But then you've kind of pivoted, as you said, to this more bottom-up approach. What did that require from you as an entrepreneur to rethink, to pivot to that approach?
Well, it was just, I guess, having the humility that you were wrong in what you guessed at first. And well, I think everybody has this dream that they want to change the world, right? Or have a big idea. And stock cropping was, it got us a long ways. We got a lot of attention right off the bat. We were featured in the documentary Food Inc. 2 because of the system. And so Michael Pollan, the famous author, saw what we were doing. He was a producer in the film and, got us included. And so, yeah, I got to go to the Telluride Film Festival because of Stock Cropper, the system, and hang out with Michael Pollan, and then go to the red carpet and meet Mark Cuban and Morgan Freeman and Chris Tucker and John Tester and Cory Booker and all sorts of cool stuff that happened from that. So, but at the same point, I knew that there was something important, bigger opportunity perhaps, or more immediate, I should say, with this protein sovereignty space, because I'd been living it myself. My family's grown all of our own protein for the last 15 years. I've raised my kids this way. My girls were, pulling hearts out of chickens when they were 5 years old out in the yard, butchering. And I've had a lot of other friends and family that have come into that with me. So we would grow a dozen hogs, either in the stock cropper or in my barn here. And we'd invite people to come together and butcher in the fall. And, it would change people's outcomes. My brother-in-law, he had a daughter that was a vegan, and until, the stock cropper pork and dad going and doing the butchering and the family raising it together, it changed her, viewpoints. Now she's back eating meat again because, she can feel comfortable with how the animals were raised and participating in the system. So there's something more deeper in meaning in this protein sovereignty space. This isn't about cost per pound of the protein. It's about the cost per experience. And that's why I really think that this is a powerful thing we're on to here.
I think it is powerful. And I this is anecdotal. I have no data behind this, but it seems like that whole sort of food sovereignty area, it continues to grow. It's no longer like a group of sort of fringe preppers that think the world's coming to end. It's like, okay, this is people who want to live more connected lives, especially when they spend too much time online and too much time, in technology. They're like, hold on, I need to connect to something real. And I see it as a trend that will continue.
So, and then juxtapose it with this. Look at what's happened in the last month with AI layoffs and what is potentially coming. What are people going to do that's meaningful with their time? We fled the farms 100 years ago, or the last 100 years, to go to the cities to do the important work because we weren't needed. Now the important work could be eliminated for a good chunk of, the workforce. What are people going to return to? I see some form of people going back and focusing more time on food and health. There's, good and bad with AI. But I think people are going to have time to do, meaningful things like grow food with their family.
Yeah. So you've gone from the Nano 2, which we talked about last time, to now the Drive, right? Can you talk about the difference in the product and how it's better suited for those types of customers?
Yeah, so we had one in between, actually, which was kind of the stepping stone to the Drive. So the Pico is what we created in 2023. And the Pico was think of it like the Tesla of chicken tractors. So it had a drive unit out on the front, which was kind of the precursor to the Drive as a standalone product now. I love my Pico because I designed it for my wife to make having chickens easy. We take out all the pain points with it. If you have chickens, you've got to go out and move it a couple times, a day in order for them to do well, to keep predators away. And, the current solution is to go and yank them around, right? For most, or push them or whatever. Well, that's fine if you're there 7 days a week and available 3 times a day. Not everybody has that, that optionality. So we designed the Pico as something that could be programmed, where you could go out and you wouldn't have to physically yank it. You could just hit a button and the thing would pick itself up and move, or it could be programmed for timed movement. So if you have to go to Kansas City for the umpteenth time to a basketball tournament with your kids for the weekend, you can program the thing and let it go. And that was the vision of the Pico. And then there's zero entry for choring it as well. So feed, water, nesting boxes, if you want to have hens in it, they're all exterior access. So really try to take all the pain points. That was the Pico. And the Pico, I've made two versions of that. And then we got to the drive. One of the biggest things that happened was I was on Ragbri in Iowa last year with the Pico. We had a stop that was focused around regenerative agriculture, and I had a buddy ask me to bring it to the Ragbri stop. Since people that don't know, Ragbri is the Des Moines Register's great annual bicycle ride across Iowa in July, and there's like 10,000 people that parade through the countryside, and they stop at all these different farm sites. And so we had people from all over the country stopping in, looking at the Pico, and it was a huge hit. People absolutely loved it. California, Florida, New York, everywhere in between. But I got the comment from a lot of folks is, I love this, but my kids they'd say, my kids have chickens, but they just have one of these coops that yank around. And I don't know if they could afford, the Tesla version of it. And so I got that comment over and over that day with all these sample people coming in to kind of give me feedback. And it really made me think like maybe what I need to do is just make a drive, because the drive solves 90% of the first principle problems. So if people have their own coop or they don't want to spend that much, like I'm leaving out a huge segment of the market, of people that grow chickens by having something that costs, $8,000 to $10,000 with the Pico. And so the idea was then let's make a drive first and let's get that perfected so the technology and everything is good there. And then we will back it into the Pico. So now that's essentially what we're coming with this year. And then with a commercial release of the drive in 2027 now for something that is a bolt-on addition to any style of chicken tractor or coop with a little bit of adaptation to the frame. And you should be able to make it, hook it up and work.
Okay, yeah. And just so everybody caught what he just said there. So this drive is you have your own coop or chicken tractor. You have your own containment for let's say chickens in this example, that is meant to be moved around. You've been pulling it around manually, but you could just hook up this drive to it and it will autonomously, I think solar powered, move your chicken pen around.
That's right. So it's solar powered with a couple drive motors on it, one to lift it, a jack to get the weight transferred to the wheel, and then a drive system that can go either forward or reverse. And it can be moved manually with a wireless key fob. So there's no yanking on it. You just go out with a remote control. So whether you're 5 or 105 is what I tell people, you can move your chicken barn. Like I have this fantasy of these things in nursing homes and old people moving their chicken pens in the green space. I think that'd be phenomenal. Or if you want to send your kids out and teach them responsibility at 4 or 5 years old, to go out and just use the remote control. I think kids would be all about that. So, but if you're not there, you can take your smartphone with our clustercluck app and you'll be able to put in, I want the barn to move at 7 a.m., 11 a.m., 3 p.m. So if I'm not there, or even if you're there and you're just busy in the house and you want to make sure that things move and you don't have to remember to go out, it will move itself for you.
Just like programming your automated sprinklers.
Exactly.
Yeah, and as far as dimensions, it's like an outboard motor. It's like an outboard motor for your chicken tractor, right?
Yeah, except it's on the front of the boat.
Yeah. Well, yeah, more like a trolley, like a big trolling motor.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that.
So what is the price difference? And you mentioned what the price of Pico was. How much less is the drive, or have you got that far yet as far as pricing?
Yeah, I mean, we have some rough ideas, so don't hold me completely to it. But I've had this, it's a fair question because I've had people asking it a lot lately as we just launched it publicly this weekend. The targeted price point right now is $2,500 for the drive. And where the Pico, if that was fully featured out, would be closer to probably 10,000. So definitely it's more expensive, than just having a coop and going out and yanking it. But so many people, I think, get into this. I've got a good friend in Ames, Iowa, that's a doctor, and he built one of these Joel Salatin chicken tractors. And he did it for one summer. And he's like, this is a huge pain in the ass. I got to go do call in the morning. I got to go out and pull this thing. And the last thing I want to do when I come home is go out and pull it again. And when I told him about this, he's like, yeah, you're going to sell 1 million of these things because there's lots of people like me that just want to come home and have a beer instead of move chickens.
Oh, man. I'm so guilty of this. I've got all the books about like, hey, farm for yourself, food sovereignty, all this stuff. And then you start doing it. You're like, okay, well, it was a lot easier to read about this than it was to actually do it because they make it sound exciting. And then it's not exciting to, every single day, multiple times a day, go out there and do something.
Yeah. The other thing I'd add that a lot of people don't figure out in the books is all the things that can go wrong when you're moving animals. So when you're pulling these things around, especially meat birds, they're really stupid. And they will just sit there and not want to move when you're going to pull. And so now you're trying to pull and then get them out of the way. And so there's a lot of issues with that. So we actually have something that we've designed called the chicken fluffer, which is an attachment for people to buy with the drive. It's basically a spinning shaft with safe rubber paddles that makes a noise while it spins, and it scares the chickens. It works phenomenal. So but when the barn goes to move, you hit your button for movement, and the fluffer will kick on first to scare the birds away from the back so they can't get run over, and gets them moved toward the front of the barn before the barn starts to move. So we've eliminated that pain point. I haven't seen that from anyone else yet as a feature in a coop. And then the other thing that we figured out this winter is how to do an automated predator apron. So if you just have a barn with a wood frame or a steel frame, if there's any gap underneath that frame, a mink or a coon or a fox will come up and dig underneath, and you'll have a Saturday Night Massacre. And so the common practice is to put like a hard steel fencing about a foot sitting out the outside of the frame. The problem with that is that, if you're doing it manually, you have to come out and you have to raise up each one of your gates manually and hook them. So when it's time to move, otherwise they'll get caught in the grass. So what we figured out how to do is how to integrate that into our central jack system. So when the barn raises up, the predator aprons raise up at the same time, and it all moves together. So we've got the fluffer, the predator apron, and the drive, and autonomous control for all of it. And we solve, I think, about 98% of the problems that can happen with the yanking chicken tractors around.
Yeah, in such a smart way too. Because I mean, even something as simple but important as like distributing these around the country is a whole lot easier than a whole kind of stock cropper like you have with the Nano 2, the whole system. It's a system that can fit, can be shipped pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, for people that are listening, trying to get a scale, like the drive is like 2 feet tall by probably 1.5 feet wide and 1.5 feet deep. So this is a very compact thing. Like this could go to farm stores and be, if we decide to go that route with distribution, very, very easy to ship. And it does. I mean, the problem with the big barns is the cost of the transportation. And then like these are complex devices that have to get assembled, and who is going to do that? And how do you engineer it so that it could be maybe assembled on site, or expect the customer to do it? So the drive really eliminates a lot of those issues by letting people just build whatever you want. And the beautiful thing about drive, this isn't just for chickens. That's a really, really important point. This thing is designed in the current specs that we have to be able to move any pen that has wheels on it up to 600 pounds in size. That's the spec that we've put on it. And so if you want to have 2 or 3 pigs in a pen and move them around, if you have a pasture and you don't want to have to build permanent fencing or whatever else, you can do that. If you want to have a couple of sheep or some bottle calves, you're not going to have a huge pen. It's not like it's going to be 60 foot wide, but I mean, it would comfortably support something that was maybe 10 by 10 or 15 by 15. And, for those animals, that's all you would really need.
Yeah.
As long as it was moving consistently.
Right.
So.
And what are you learning? I'm really curious about this market, right? Because it's a lot different than the market we usually talk about here is like, how many Midwestern row crop farmers are there in the U.S. type of thing. This opens up a whole new, huge market that's quite a bit different than selling to kind of commercial producers like your background in ag retail. What are you learning about the market?
Yeah, it's a lot more friendly than the farmer market. And I say that lovingly because I've had a great career in retail, corn and soybean farming. But no, so it's exciting because it's growing and there's a lot of them out there. And we have a first to market product that could be a huge fit for a large chunk. So just some quick market numbers on this. So there's 12 million backyard chicken operations in North America. There's 1.5 million homesteads that are growing their own protein as well. So that's a 13.5 million TAM, or total addressable market, I should say. And of people that are either have a fixed coop that the animals are just, in one spot because that's the easiest way for people to do because they don't have the solution, or they're yanking chicken tractors around, or they're letting them free range and be open to predators. So if we had an option where we could solve a lot of those issues, open people up to having the things constantly being able, because if you want to raise really good eggs or good meat, the animals need to be in fresh grass and soil all the time. That is the absolute key for it. And that's what we really solve with the drive. So,
and the other cool thing about this is there is some really established distribution. You've got your like Tractor Supply type companies that are sort of, we have D&B supply up here in the Pacific Northwest area. That's kind of like Tractor Supply as well. Is that the idea, is to kind of sell through those types of channels?
So eventually, I think so. Initially we're going to come out and we're going to have enough demand, I think, for what we'll do. We'll probably just be D2C at this point to get our legs underneath us. Direct to consumer is what I mean by that. So, but yeah, I think down the road, once we get our sea legs underneath us from the initial scale up, it only makes sense probably to go that route. And I have some very good inroads with some people I've been working with for the last 6 years around stock cropper. That can easily make those introductions to farm stores like you've talked about. So that's ready to go when we're ready to be able to service that level. I'm hoping that we get there and we have those problems to solve. That'd be
right. And so the idea with the direct to consumer first is like, hey, you can start to ramp up your production. You can learn from early customers, that sort of thing.
Right. Just to get it right before we really take a huge leap here. So and honestly, I mean, going to those more distributed channels, it does open up another can of worms in some cases of problems to solve there. Yes, it's more, reach that you can have with just, available in every town. But, there's a lot of hurdles to when you're working with many different stores that I've learned from other friends that are in this space. And so, we're kind of hoping, at least initially, that we'll be able to have a really effective social media strategy to really have fun with this product and get it really targeted at, the homesteading and chicken farming and, this whole protein sovereignty movement that is really starting to swell, and do as much as we can there. And then we'll probably shift into the more distributed model at that point. So,
well, I almost never, in fact, I don't think I've ever said this to any guest on the podcast, but you should really take this thing on Shark Tank. Like, this seems like an ideal Shark Tank story to me. I mean, because you've got, it's a unique angle. It's a unique product. You're a farmer. You've met Mark Cuban, although I don't know that he remembers it. And but more than anything, like, there is a growing market for this product and it's unique. But anyway, I don't know if you thought about that, but you should apply.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'll tell a story about that. When I was at the Food Inc. premiere, so Mark Cuban's film company is the one that distributed. Magnolia Films had distributed Food Inc. And I had no idea he was going to be there. And my cousin went with me to the premiere because she lives out there. And we were talking in this cocktail space. And she said the same thing to me. She's like, Zach, have you ever thought about going on Shark Tank? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, like, stock cropper is probably not their lane with these big barns moving through. This is before I had the drive concept. And I just basically kind of poo-pooed her. And then 5 minutes later, she nudges me and she says, do not turn around. But Mark Cuban is standing 4 feet behind you right now. And then she's like, well, you have to go pitch him now. And so I had to patiently wait until we were just about ready to go in the movie. I literally had to give Mark Cuban my 30-second elevator pitch. But then we were whisked away, and that was nothing more came from it. But yeah, I think with the drive, I think there could be a fit for something like that. Yeah, we'll see. My fellow Iowa entrepreneur, Billy Osmus, was actually on Shark Tank and successfully got a deal here this last fall with Joanna Cochran and Chip and Joanna Gaines for her products.
Oh, wow. Oh,
yeah.
I'll have to check that out. That's really cool. And I know for you, last time you were on the show, as far as like, how do you do the engineering and manufacturing of all this? I know you still farm, right? So you've got a lot to do. You were partnered with Dawn Equipment. You've since kind of gone your own way with that, but talk about how are you getting all these things built?
Yeah. So we were partnered with Dawn up until about last year at this time. And then we've gone a different direction. And I've basically, in the last year, I've rebuilt a whole new team. So I was at Jason Mock's field day, for those that follow the Farm Weird space, last June. And I was actively looking for new engineering and ran into a kid there that Jason introduced me to. That it was pretty wild. He was actually walking around the field day that I was speaking at with stock cropper with kind of a stock cropper ripoff device that he was showing people. And I saw him do it, and I went over and talked to him like, this kid has balls big enough to come to something I'm speaking at and try to rip me off. I'm like, I need to hire this guy. And that's what I did. And I brought him on board, and he's absolutely fantastic. He's a farm kid. He's got both electrical and mechanical engineering aptitude, and he understands livestock, like absolute diamond in the rough. Because when you're engineering this stuff, I've worked with, 4 or 5 engineers, and if they don't get livestock, they don't understand how to design this stuff. And we end up stubbing our toe with making too many mistakes. And, this guy is the guy that really solidified the drive idea. And so he's the one doing the background development work. And then the other thing that really changed for me is that I got a new strategic advisor through Food Inc. too. He was actually on a business flight to Singapore. He's an ex investment banker and hedge fund manager on Wall Street. And now he's got a couple big startup companies that he's a part of as well. But he was watching Food Inc. too on a flight over the Indian Ocean at 4 a.m. and saw what I had and said, holy cow, this guy has exactly what I need, or not what I need, but what my mom needs. Because he had a mom who had a farm up in Vermont that had these crappy chicken tractors that he was having to help her with and yank them around. And they were too heavy for her. And he's like, this solves the problem. Bingo. And so he reached out and sent me an email and said, hey, I love what you got. Number one, I want one. Number two, I want to know about investing and joining the team and helping you bring, because he saw the potential of it. And so now we've got an engineer, a strategic advisor to help, guide me through the next steps of trying to scale this thing up, because he's been in that place before. So pretty neat turnaround in the last 9 months of what we've been able to do.
That's great. And then they're helping you get kind of like a manufacturing partner.
So the first sets we're have a beta test run this year. We're actually fabricating those ourselves. My guy has actually his own little fab shop in Illinois that the first ones are going to get built, but then we will be likely contracting. We've got a couple different fabricator options across Iowa, Minnesota, and Illinois that we've already been in contact with, that when we go to scale things out here later this year, commercial launch in 27. So.
You mentioned the farm weird kind of movement, and I associate that with Jason Mock, you mentioned, and yourself and others. And it seems like it's a growing mindset, right? Like, hey, let's try something different, because for one reason or another, what we have always been doing is just not working, or not what we want to do long term. It seems like that's growing. Has that traditionally been kind of the bottleneck to other people kind of doing what you're doing, is like trying to come up with farm-led innovation? Or is there something else that's sort of like just preventing more farmer-led innovation, farm kind of startups from happening?
Yeah, so I'll speak for Jason and myself, or at least our situations. We're fairly unique in the fact that we don't have a lot of masters, keeping us inside the box. So my dad retired 12 years ago from farming, which gave me, I don't have anyone saying, that's stupid, young man, you shouldn't be doing that, or we're going to keep doing it my way. And so that gave me a lot of room to expand and play. And when I started Stock Cropper, I was also far enough in life from a financial standpoint that I could afford to take some risks with what I'd been able to build with having my own retail business. And I had the agency to step outside and do that. I think that's a big part of it, because it's risky. And I mean, I've spent a ton of money trying to develop this stuff and taken a lot of chances. Not everybody, especially this is more geared probably to young people wanting to do this, and young people don't always have that level of agency. But Jason's in the similar situation, where he's got the ability to take some of these chances. There's a lot of people that are in that place, but they just don't, because maybe, they're working with other folks, and there's the social pressure. Anytime you do something different in farming, I mean, it's a pretty closed-minded system in a lot of ways. So when you tell people you're going to put a three-ring animal circus in the middle of a cornfield, and you're going to put it on a state highway, and you got to worry about people going off the road because they're wondering, what the hell is that moron doing again? I get a lot of that, and that's fine. But we've also taken the chance to do some of that stuff, has also landed some pretty sweet places, like precision planting this last year, so or the last 2 years. So yeah, I think there's always been kind of a fairly tunnel vision. Stay inside, color inside the lines, just do what grandpa did, dad did. And the thing I love about Farm Weird is it gives permission for other people that maybe agree to maybe have the courage to try to get outside of that. And that's what I love. The people in this space are fantastic. You go to a Farm Weird field day, if you want to be around awesome people in agriculture, go to Jason Mock's field day on June 27th this year. You will find some of the coolest people in the business there for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of that, I think what really got me excited when I saw this newest product, the Drive, is I could see 3 years from now a collection of videos of the creative ways people are using this product. Like, you leave room for the user to implement their own creativity based on their own context, right? Like, hey, here's this cool chicken tractor I made. that is powered by this drive, and I put them together. And I mean, I think there's something magical in that, because that's hard from a product design standpoint. It's like to solve the 90%, but actually leave the 10%.
Yeah, because maybe they'll have something that they really like about their coop or their specific use case. But the biggest problem is how do I mean, not everybody can put together the technology and the pack and all the tooling and things that you have to build the thing. But it is easy to build your own structure to attach. I mean, you can whip that out in a weekend, no problem.
Yeah, you could pay a FFA kid to build one for you. I mean, there's just so many options.
This could be an FFA project for every chapter, in the country.
So that's a really cool idea. I think every school, especially any school that has a farm, should have one of these. You go to all these FFA events, somebody's got to be moving the chicken tractor around, and now you have a drive that could do that. Anyway, I see the inflection point that you see. It's like, okay, this is like exactly true to the origin of clustercluck, exactly true to the origin of stockcropper, but totally reimagined. It's very cool. So obviously, I'm a big fan. Now, we've already talked about this some, but okay, a year ago, you kind of decided to go your own way with the engineering and manufacturing. You split off amicably from Dawn. You made a comment to me before we started recording this, like you thought you were kind of dead in the water at that point. Now, you've talked about this person that you found, this engineer. Other than that part of the story, what else did it take from you to kind of rebuild?
I don't know. It was pretty much that. I just needed to have faith, because I don't have the skills to do any of this stuff other than the fact that I know how to sell and I know how to get in front of people and I can be passionate and I can get people to believe in it. But when I lost Dawn, that was a big hit because they were, filling that gap. And so it's like, man, am I ever going to be able to find, somebody else to really do that for me again? And that's when when I stumbled into these other people, it gave me the will. Like I told my wife, we're not going to put any more of our own money into stockcropper. It's going to be somebody else's dime. But when I got that team of people around me where it's like, man, I can actually see this happening. We've got this product, and I said, well, dear, we're going to put some more money in because we got something to believe in again here. And so yeah, and here we are, whatever I really made the decision in about the end of July last year to commit and to bring the engineer on and then everything else. And since so we've, built the drive, been testing it and, getting ready for this beta thing, we've done that all in, I don't know, whatever that is, 7 or 8 months or something.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So you convinced your wife to say like, all right, maybe we should put some more money into this based on this kind of new vision. But I imagine she's probably got a limit on that. Is this a business that can attract venture funding, or does this take kind of a unique sort of funding model? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so we're definitely working towards that. So if anybody's interested in talking to me, more about opportunities, they can reach out to my email. I'd be happy, discuss what could happen in the future with that here for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so I mean, outside of kind of the more institutional path, have you thought about anything like crowdfunding or anything like that, or what are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, we definitely have. The other thing that we've done is we just got it set up on our website here this last weekend, the ability to take deposits to generate cash flow for us to help scale up here that way. So if you like what you're hearing and you want to, get down, we will have a very limited production run. Our plan is right now, what we have scheduled, it'll be pretty limited for 2027. So if you want to get on that list, we've got a deposit capacity and be able to take payment via Stripe on our website for both the drive and then the Pico as well when it comes to market likely beta in 27 of that. And then 2028 is when we have it scheduled right now to come there. So
awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. What didn't we get to that we should make sure we mention before I let you go?
Yeah, I think if you want to, follow along, we're really trying to ramp up our social media stuff. I've been pretty quiet up until this point because we've got patents pending on all this stuff. I should make mention of that specifically around with the drive, but we're able to talk about it now. And so, but make sure you follow along to us. If you want to go back and see more of the history of stockcropper, I would recommend going to our YouTube channel. I've got like 5 or 6 years of content on there if you want to see kind of where we've been with this thing. But yeah, we're on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. If you search stockcropper on any of those platforms, other than X, you'd have to search @Zebulus Prime, but I'm sure we can put all those things in the show notes. So.
Yeah, definitely. We'll add those there. And yeah, I'm excited for this next chapter. I think You always hear about like the 10-year overnight success, but this feels like one of those things where it's like you could only arrive at where you're at now because of the many years that you've kind of put into this. But I feel like it's cool. It's an inflection point. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. So
yeah, I appreciate it's great to be on a third time with you, and I appreciate your support over the journey here, Tim.
Well, it is always great to catch up with Zack, and I'm particularly excited about this next chapter for Stock Cropper. Highly, highly recommend, if you're at all intrigued by what Zack's doing, follow him on X, connect with him on LinkedIn, follow their YouTube channel. I'll leave some links in the show notes. Reach out to him and talk to him. Just a very personable guy, willing to share his perspective with you, and he's got some fantastic experiences. I'm excited for where the future of Stock Cropper is headed. So best of luck to you, Zack. Thanks again for coming back on the show. Last but never least, thank you for your time and your attention. I do not take it lightly. I'll be back next week with another story of ag innovation.